BaaS as a market is predicted to be a $10 trillion business by 2025. I want to say. Don't quote me on that. If I'm wrong, flash up the correct figure there as to when. And obviously we're seeing some quite fast and fantastic examples. Which sectors in particular are starting to tap into BaaS, and why is it such a growing sector? For example, I know, Kim, you mentioned a big retailer, for example, or an online seller selling TVs. Where are some of the sectors where is that opportunity, and how can fintechs and brands benefit from BaaS?
Mm-hmm. But first of all, everyone can integrate embedded finance, right? There is no exclusion and restrictions. But where we see and where we feel that the demand is the highest is, on the one hand, retailers, e-tailers, large brands, having a whole ecosystem built around the consumers and having the desire in order to integrate embedded finance. On the other hand, fintechs. Nothing to do with large brands, but fintechs willing to embed in their special new use case that piece of finance delivery, so to speak. And as a third category, let's say banks and neobanks as well. Let me start with retailers. So retailers have clearly understood the importance to embed payments. There has been a research of JP Morgan showing that if you, as a retailer, in your customer journey, imagine e-commerce, right? It's easier to imagine the journey. So if you embed payments in a very smooth way in your customer journey, it increases the revenue and the spending per customer ×2 up to ×5. So large brands are very much aware, if they do that very well, that it'll give them a lot of benefit, right? So that's a clear driver and a clear target segment in the market, where you see already for a long time that by embedding payments, which is one of the aspects of embedded finance, it benefits because their revenue increases by doing so. So that's one example on how we offer, let's say, card as a service, payments as a service, as one of the examples of delivering banking as a service. A totally other example is in the area of fintechs, where together with the fintech, we rather focus on launching new innovation. So let me give a nice example of a German customer we have, called Unit Plus. So the nice thing that we do over there is to really deliver a pay with your investment portfolio mechanism. So how does it work? Unit Plus offers to their consumers, the consumers are the customers, the possibility to put money in an ETF investment portfolio. But the nice thing is that this investment portfolio is linked with a Mastercard debit card. So they are both linked together. And then the consumer can just start paying with a debit card worldwide for free. So user just uses the card like he's used to do. But the nice thing is that instead of the card being linked to money on a current account with no interest at all, because these days interest on a current account definitely are nothing, yeah. The card is linked to an investment portfolio where you have like higher margins and higher yield, because there you have your money working in the capital market. So for the first time in lifetime, so to speak, we are linking a classic payment instrument being a Mastercard debit card with an investment portfolio, rather than linking it with money on the current account. So this is also an example of banking as a service in a completely different area. So this is how you can imagine embedded finance, which is a fluffy word, really in practical, tangible use cases at work for nice and innovative use cases that fintechs come up with, and we support them with the delivery of the financial services in a nice, secure regulatory framework.
So yeah, so it's all about, it's the limit of your imagination.
Indeed.
Henri, let's talk about payments within this BaaS landscape. What does the future of payments look like from your perspective now? You know, if it's powered by BaaS partnerships, what are we going to kind of sort of see in that landscape?
Right. You know, I think that for us, BaaS is essentially the missing link to drive innovation in finance and in payments. You know, as Kim explained, payments is a key interaction point for many retailers, for many companies. It's a high velocity point. So people make payments every day. And if you can associate your brand to that transaction, you know, you're a lot more top of mind, you're a lot more present. And that's really important. What's really cool about BaaS is that you don't have to be a bank to be in payments, right? This is the big revolution. And with BaaS, which essentially socializes the investment in the infrastructure and the licensing part, really the hurdle to launch your own solution is a lot lower. And a lot of companies can now really get in market with a Mastercard, with an Aion account in a matter of months. That's really innovation at warp speed. And we're seeing a lot of interest, as Kim was saying, in the retailer space, because that's a space that they want to be in and be front instead of being back, which often happens when it's dealt with by somebody else. What I'm really curious about, and Kim alluded to it, is when banks will embrace this model. You know, banks are very dependent on legacy. Their IT roadmap today is dominated by compliance, by regulatory projects, and they essentially don't bring a lot of value to their clients. So instead of having the banks, you know, in Europe working on the next iteration of PSD3, this could be socialized leveraging BaaS, and banks could free up that time to work on innovation, on things that really matter for their clients, which is, you know, usability and front-end services. And that's where I really would like to see BaaS going next, and developing that for more of the traditional sector. That
could be would be a massive detour, but then you kind of have to ask the question as to what is a bank, because if they're literally just become the brand, and if everything else is kind of all, they're a brand and an ecosystem of all of these different solutions all together.
Yeah, but banks these days are clearly technology companies, right? But what you're seeing, and we're seeing it in our market, is essentially a squeeze out of the smaller players, because they have difficulty following the arms race with regard to technology investments. So is there an intelligent play here where, you know, you keep your core, you keep your positioning towards your client base, but you actually are able to leverage BaaS to socialize a lot of that investment?
Johnathon, looking at open banking and BaaS, I love seeing the different variations of charts when people talk about different generations of fintech. You kind of have, you know, PayPal being sort of generation 1, and then some people say, actually no, lump those all together. Looking at these sort of different waves of fintechs that we're getting into the market, now that there's open banking and BaaS is frankly very quick to implement, how do you think that's going to drive innovation for the next wave of fintechs that we're gonna see across Europe?
Yeah, I think indeed that lately we have observed quite a significant improvement in the banking as a service and open banking possibility. As Kim explained, there are more and more products being offered, but more importantly for us in particular is the improved quality of those products. Like take PSD2 for instance. If you had to do a PSD2 payment 18 months ago, you would have needed your card reader, you would have needed a lot of complexity that would actually make the use case barely usable. And it was also a challenge for the project we implemented. Now we can see in the last month or the last year, let's say, things have really improved in those areas. So beyond the fact that there are more and more product offering, the quality has really improved, and I think it's more important for startups that are really focused on user facing things and where quality is very important. And you speak here about fintechs, but as it was said also previously, actually any company that wants to offer banking product will rely on this more and more. It can be startups that want to become a fintech, or it can be a large corporation that wants to offer banking products, basically. And in particular for startups, you know how it works. We need to test, to iterate, to change, and always it's a continuous improvement cycle. So with open banking and banking as a service, it will allow all those players to move faster and cheaper. So to experiment way more, in the sense that they will be able to deliver faster, iterate faster. And for a startup, it's very important to find your product market fit, quite fast. So this will really help foster innovation.
Absolutely. And that's one of the things with startups as well, especially at the moment. You have to, the time to market a product, gone are the days where you can spend years literally developing something before it comes to market. On that note, Johnathon, now, no pressure, because Henri and Kim are on the line, but given your experience working with Aion, Vodeno and Mastercard, what's worked about this partnership, and what tips would you give other organizations who are thinking about a BaaS partnership? What is it that makes a partnership like this work?
So the thing is that the risk you take is pretty minor. So there is still always a risk and some cost of development and so on, but the risk you take is quite minor, and you can try something quite fast and actually without spending huge amounts of money. So what we could say is, let's not reinvent the wheel. You have like banking players that are good at what they do. As a startup or another company with another core business, you are good at what you do. You just need to keep things going on like that. Focus on what you do and you do it well. Focus on your UX, your simplicity, but make sure you are not becoming another company that has to fit to complex banking regulation, technical banking flows. So really stay focused on what you do and keep doing it well.
Oh, okay. Like let's throw this open to everyone. Think about focusing on what you do in that partnership model. We were talking about banks earlier having that legacy, and they are effectively becoming tech companies. What do you think that the larger, more incumbent banks should be doing to take advantage of this BaaS model, while still focusing on what they're good at?
The best advice for a traditional bank, which direction to go to? Is that your question?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, basically, as Henri pointed out, if as an established bank you also want to offer banking as a service, there is one major key element that needs to be in place, meaning technology. And technology, you mentioned earlier in our conversation, like outsourcing software, like offering software as a service is something that is quite common already. I mean, in the B2B market for years. Yeah. So in the old days, everyone was building and coding on their own mainframes, etc. And then there was the trend to kind of outsource it, and rather to have teams of developers and everything coding on their systems, to just use it as a service and to run a particular kind of program, let's say, elsewhere rather than in the house. Banking as a service is exactly the same concept, but outsourcing the complete financial services, which is not just a piece of software. So in order to be able to do that as a bank, you must be what I call reachable. So technically speaking, you must have APIs of players that are then able to reach you through these APIs and really consume all these services, like to issue a card, to grant a loan. All that needs to be technology tip-top in order to be able to deliver it. So a lot of traditional banks are not even at that point for the delivery of their own services. So the banks having the ambition to go into that area really have to focus on technology. But it doesn't stop with the technology. So I agree with Henri that banks are becoming more and more technology players in a way that it has become more important than it used to be in order to deliver their core banking service or to deliver the service to a third party. However, it always needs to be complemented by expertise and first of all, vis-a-vis the regulator, but also in the banking area, because that's why those retailers and large brands come to us, because not just because we have the technology in order to do what they're looking for, but also the expertise. We have the compliance teams, we have the legal teams, we know the local regulations, we are supervised by the national banks. So not only technology, but always in combination with the necessary licenses to act and to deliver those services, but also the teams and the expertise, having run a bank ourselves, and sharing together with the delivery of the technology, also everything what goes around it, because we're still dealing with money of people, right? So if there's an algorithm, and then people knowing how to steer the car, so to speak, that go with it. So that's important for banks if they really have the ambition to move into that area, in my opinion.